presenter today is Caroline Phillips, so welcome Caroline.
So good morning everybody, or I should say goedemorgen, Amsterdam. Goedemorgen? So my name is Caroline Phillips and I head up the Developer Evangelism Experience team here in the Netherlands. And as a result, I really wanted to give you a really warm welcome to today's event. And the reason why we're super proud to have the event here today is a number of reasons. So firstly, as you probably know, North Holland is the home of the Microsoft Cloud's West Data Center. So we're super proud for that reason. Secondly, we have some amazingly well-known customers here, Dutch customers, all running on top of Azure. So whether that's running their infrastructure, whether that's running their developer environments, or whether that's running their SaaS-based solutions on Azure. So you'll recognize many of the names here on the screen today. So companies like Shell, PostNL, Heineken, RTL, and then ISVs such as Snelstart or Unit 4, and then startups like Vamp, who many of you may not yet be familiar with. And thirdly, today's event is a sellout. So we have over 1,300 registered people here today. Unfortunately, we started a few minutes late, so apologies, but there's a really bad accident on the A10. And also some people might be watching that football game that's taking place tonight. So stick up your hands if you're Ajax fans. Okay, we have a few football fans in the room. And you may have guessed I'm from the UK, so I might be supporting the other team. Apologies for that. So again, I want to say thank you for coming today. 1,300 people here today, but I also want to say a special thank you to those that took the time to tweet or post red shirt selfies, and that will become clear a little bit later. And last but not least, those of you who are following us today on Twitter, we're using Redshirt AMS, so please do follow us today. Now, this is the first leg of what is called the Azure Redshirt Tour, and maybe a few of you are wondering, so what is that? And maybe, who is this gentleman in the red shirt that's on stage with me? So some of you may know, maybe some of you don't. So as I mentioned, it's a one-of-a-kind of event, so you're going to get a chance to see Scott Guthrie, also known as our Executive Vice President of the Microsoft Cloud and Enterprise Group, or the man in the red shirt. Scott's going to be very much unplugged today, so please bear with him because he's going to be coding live. Everything you'll see is very much live, and sometimes there are challenges with live demos. And you're going to get to hear from Scott about what's new, what's happening with the Microsoft Cloud Platform today. So as I said, we're super proud to have Scott here today. It's been a few years since Scott was last here. So I think the last time was maybe 4 years ago when he was at Tech Days. So we're really pleased to have Scott back here today. So what we've got coming up for you is lots of live demos. We're going to announce the winner of the Red Shirt Selfie competition on stage during the break. And then I want to extend a personal welcome to everybody to stay behind at the end of the event. We are going to have a community networking and drinks, and that's probably the best way to build up to the game tonight. Or for those non-football fans, it's a great way to wind down for the Camelfart weekend. So please do join us. And with that, I want to actually thank all of the partners who will be in the community networking area this evening. So you recognise some open source vendors on here. You'll recognise some container solution providers on here. You'll recognise some community groups as well. So I want to say a big thank you to those people for coming along today as well. And that's it from my side. So I want to say I'm really honoured to be able to welcome on stage Scott. So as I mentioned, Scott is our Executive Vice President of the Microsoft Cloud and Enterprise Group, and he's also the man in the very famous red shirt. So with that, I want to say, will you please give a really warm Amsterdam welcome to Scott Guthrie.
It's great to be here. Can people hear me okay? Am I on that? Yeah. Great. Thanks so much for having me here, and it's great to be back here at the Rock. And we got a whole fun-filled day of demos, coding, and lots of cloud ahead. And as Caroline mentioned, I think I had probably like 25 demos over the next couple hours. We had a brief scare this morning when the internet wasn't working. It's really hard to do a 5-hour talk about cloud with no internet, but it looks like it's working now, so fingers crossed. Otherwise you'll see me tap dance for 5 hours and sing. So I think the reason why a lot of people are here is obviously to learn more about the cloud, and really, I think there's lots of people in this audience probably that are at various stages of the journey to the cloud. So how many people here are building cloud apps today? We're great, about 2/3 or half. How many people here are using Azure today? Great, lots of hands. Hopefully this talk has a little bit of something for everyone, and that even if you're a new person to Azure, there's a little bit of intro at the beginning. We're going to dive into demos within about 4 minutes. And then if you're an expert on Azure, there's a whole bunch of stuff that hopefully will still also be new to you in terms of new demos, and especially at the end, a whole bunch of tips and tricks that should even show off some of the more advanced capabilities that you can use to manage your solutions. So let's go ahead and get started. So, I think one of the things that I find really exciting about being a developer right now is just, all of the new things that we get to take advantage of. Whether it's containers, which we'll show in a little bit, microservices, which we'll show in a bit, native mobile apps, which we'll show in a bit, IoT, advanced analytics, cognitive services. It's an exciting time in terms of just the sheer number of new technologies that are coming out right now. And most of these are now powered with the cloud. And the cloud's really enabling a much faster iteration of development than I think we've ever had before. At the same time, all these things are really cool. But the other thing that I do hear from a lot of people as I do tours like this is this is great, but at the same time, the expectation to be an expert on all these things is tough. And it's difficult to stay on top of all this different technology that's out there. Certainly, as more and more organizations are moving to the cloud, the expectations on you to drive not only the technology within your company, but also really the business results, because so many of these applications now touch customers and directly drive revenue, is also increasing. And I think we all live in a world where the security threats have gone up. And how do you build all this new tech, using all these new capabilities, driving all these new scenarios, and not get hacked and keep your company secure? Doing all that is challenging. And some of these concerns kind of go directly in terms of what we're trying to do with Azure, which is build a cloud and a cloud platform and tools that help make you successful in terms of leveraging all of these cutting-edge technologies and make them incredibly approachable to every developer. Build in things like security, compliance, and trust so that you can really bet your businesses on this technology, and enable you to build solutions faster than ever before, and really deliver the productivity that enables you to leverage all this great tech, do it securely, and at the end of the day, really deliver the results that you need. And hopefully you're going to see this throughout all the demos that I showed today. And it's sort of these three things of innovation, trust, and results is kind of a common theme that hopefully you'll see throughout everything that I do. And I'm a big believer in showing, not telling. And that's why we're going to do so many demos today, is to really show off what you can do with all this technology. So with that, let's go ahead, drop into a demo here, and introduce Azure for people that are brand new to it, and then show off a few new features even for those who have been using it for a while. So what I'm doing here is I'm loading up the Azure Management Console. This is a browser-based experience that you can use to manage all your Azure resources with today. And so you can create new resources, you put the new menu, and you can create VMs, which we'll talk about later. You can create web apps and mobile apps, which we'll talk about later. You can create databases, which we'll talk about later. And the good news is you can do all this stuff in terms of creating things, and then you can manage existing resources that you already have. And one of the things you can do within Azure, which is kind of nice, is have a dashboard view that you can customize. And in fact, I'll show the tips and tricks. You can have multiple dashboards. You can have a different one for, say, your development versus your operations and so forth. And what's nice is you can customize it however you want and pin any of these resources to the dashboard and lay it out however you want. And what's nice is you can do this both in terms of managing resources, but also monitoring them as well. And so you can see here on the right, I've also pinned a couple of metrics and monitoring views for some of my most common applications and resources, so I can see them as well every time I log into the core screen. And again, the nice thing about Azure is you can manage all these different types of resources in one place. So for example, this is a virtual machine, and you can see kind of a standard view of the different types of resources in this VM. One of the things that's kind of cool about this particular virtual machine in particular is it's using our new M series of VMs inside Azure, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And one of the neat things about this is it supports up to 3.5 terabytes of RAM and 120 virtual CPUs. And you can create this now in about 60 seconds anywhere around the world. And so having that ability to kind of create that much power in a single instance and run anything in it, I love that as a developer, being able to do that in about 60 seconds. And the great thing is, because you pay only by the minute, I also love the fact that I can stop it within 60 seconds as well. And that's one of the nice things about the cloud. So I'm going to show off a cool demo here. So you've seen virtual machines before, I'm sure. Let's connect to this VM, just to show this big one here. And I'm using a desktop in this case here in order to actually open it up. And this is where you can see all these 120 CPUs, 3.5 terabytes of RAM. It's a big machine. And you might wonder, what could you run in this virtual machine? And one of the reasons why we created this was specifically actually for SAP workloads, which is something that like the last time I was here at Tech Days, if I'd suggested you should move your core financial system for a large enterprise into the cloud, I think people would have thought I was crazy. But it's something we now see lots and lots of the top 100 companies in the world now actively doing. And having kind of a large 3.5 terabyte system is ideal for very large databases and very large SAP workloads. We even have up to now 20 terabyte systems specifically for SAP that you can run for HANA and experience, so that as you go to run your systems, you really have at your fingertips a lot of the information necessary in order to actually know are they actually working, and if they are failing, what the cause is. And then the last thing I'll just show in this demo, and we'll go back to some slides and do some more demos, is another capability that we built in directly into the product, which is something we call our Azure Security Center. Again, I'll go into more detail on it this afternoon, but I'll just give a brief look at it right now. And this is basically a capability we built into the product that helps you build systems that are more secure. And we know kind of as you're using new capabilities inside the cloud, one of the things is, how do you know you're following the right security best practices? And what we try to do is automate that directly in the Azure experience. And so this is, everything here above the prevention section is all free to every Azure customer. You don't have to pay anything for it. And it basically is scanning the environment that I'm in, and will basically tell me anytime it sees things that are not correct from a security perspective. And so you can see here, it's noticed on some of my VMs, I don't have endpoint protection turned on. I'm missing some system updates. So in other words, I patched a VM, or I've not patched a VM specifically. You can see I've forgotten to turn on disk encryption on 4 of those VMs. And so I'm not running with encryption at rest turned on, and so forth. And basically I can use this to kind of understand very quickly, I'm not following that best practice. You click on each of them, we actually have a little guide that tells you how to fix it. And we do similar things on the networking side. So we can tell you, do you have ports open, which is a very common problem. Or do you have one giant virtual network that you're putting all your infrastructure on, instead of subdividing it into subnets where you basically end up controlling access so that your web server can't talk directly to your database, etc. And so you'll see us kind of build these types of capabilities in directly into the product. And the whole goal here being, how do you help build things that are more secure? And ultimately track down issues that are happening. Actually, I got a mail literally this morning from someone that I gave this demo to last week at a workshop. And they actually said, hey, I saw this, turned it on after seeing your demo, and I actually detected, I had a VM that had a weak password, because that's one of the things it'll tell you about, and that it was actually actively being attacked, and it had actually been infected by an attacker. And this thing actually pinpointed exactly the problem, and he was suddenly a believer in terms of the power of the cloud, because he's like, I never would have figured that out if it had been running in my traditional environment, because we just didn't have that type of capability to see it. So that's a quick view in terms of just the overall experience with Azure. Hopefully gave you a sense in terms of how some of these different pieces fit together. Let's go back now to the slides and talk a little bit more, and then we'll dive into more demos in just a few minutes. So I kind of showed off the experience and kind of how we're really trying to guide the product towards your success. And one of the nice things about our experience with Azure is that it runs all over the world. And so you can take advantage of all these capabilities literally all over the world, including here in Amsterdam, where we have one of these giant data center regions populated. And so each of these little white dots on this map indicate a data center region. And a data center region for us is typically multiple data centers. I think here in Amsterdam we probably have like 9 or 10 data centers now that we put close together in sort of a campus. So it looks like one giant data center, but there's sort of separate isolated buildings. So no one building gets too big, which is sort of a risk for us. And from your perspective, basically each of these little dots is something that when you go and deploy an application, you can effectively choose where you want to deploy your system. And the beauty here is you can now not just have great computing power here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but you can also have computing power all over the world. And this ability now for anyone here to build a system not just for citizens and or employees in the Netherlands, but to basically be able to compete all over the world even more effectively, ends up being an incredibly powerful capability that the cloud delivers. And what's cool about each of these little dots is they're really big. I like to joke you can see them from space, which is sort of true actually. And what I thought I'd do is just show a video giving you a sense of what the scale of one of these little dots looks like. So here's a video. In addition to kind of running these data centers all over the world, the other thing that we really focus on is making sure that we run them securely and in a trusted way. And so not only do we have more data center regions than the other cloud provider, but we also now have more compliance certifications than the other cloud provider as well. These are just some of the compliance certifications that we have today. And you can see they span industries, they span geographies, public sector, as well as regional ones. And the goal with all of them is, and they're all independently audited. But the goal is, for you as you do your business, you often need these compliance certifications. So they're not just peace of mind, but it also really opens up the opportunity for you to sell into any market and to be able to build any solution for any market as part of it. And today we have 90% of the Fortune 500 companies, so the largest 500 companies in the world, now deployed and running their businesses using Azure and the Microsoft Cloud. And as Caroline showed this morning, we've got some great customers here in the audience. So thank you for everyone here that's taking advantage of Azure today. And hopefully by the end of the talk, you'll be even more excited to take advantage of it going forward. So let's just another customer video in terms of talking about some of the experiences and what people are taking advantage of today.
Microsoft is a that gives us key cloud-based infrastructure that we need. We made a big decision to break down our existing platform, which was one big, large, monolithic lump of software, into a microservice architecture.
This Black Friday, we served 167 million requests in the 24 hours. Average page response times came down by about half a second. That's what you're looking for in a new platform.
Azure provides the glue that brings together the data from our internal on-premise systems and joining that with information held in the cloud. We use Azure Application Services and also Azure SQL Database to provide the data and resources to the application. To achieve single sign-in, we have federated across from Azure Active Directory to our Oracle Access Management.
And that was fantastic. That was the equivalent of putting a very old car on the moon.
We wanted to make it really easy for our customers to get meaning out of their data. The industrial Internet of Things is different only in the fact that our customers have very stringent requirements about how data moves. We want one place to egress that data that we can lock down. The advantage of it being Azure is IoT Hubs makes it very easy to get that data in. Power BI makes it very easy to visualize that data once it's there.
It allows us to put a data scientist in a box.
Microsoft helped us achieve our digital transformation. It's put us over the top. You guys are saying growing leaps and bounds. And we have not had any issues whatsoever from a capacity perspective because of the on-demand capability and scalability of Azure. We can handle volume. We're like, bring it on. We want more.
So in terms of what Azure provides, and this is where we're going to spend the rest of the talk today really diving into, is it provides both kind of core infrastructure capabilities, so base compute, storage, and networking, and then a whole bunch of platform services on top. And so kind of the way this talk's going to be structured is they're going to go look at a whole bunch of these different areas, show off a demo for each, and kind of give you kind of a good sense of some of the new capabilities also that we just come out with that you can take advantage of and leverage. What I do is start talking about some of the infrastructure capabilities and how you can basically spin up virtual machines and infrastructure in the cloud in an incredibly quick way. So one of the things that we've done with Azure is, as you saw earlier, you can create a virtual machine, you can manage very large virtual machines. And one of the things that we've done over the years, and in particular the last 12 months or so, is come out with what we call new VM family sizes that you can take advantage of as you start building your applications. And one of the things in particular that we're seeing is sort of the desire from developers to be able to use different VM types for very specific workloads. And I think one of the exciting things about the cloud is it's no longer just about spinning up a generic virtual machine. You can now spin up a virtual machine with GPUs, and not just a generic GPU, but one that's very specific for visualization, or one that's very specific for computation, or one that's very specific for deep learning networks, or deep neural networks. And this slide here shows off a lot of the VM types that we've had historically. You can see that last one, the large SAP instance, was one of the ones that I just demoed earlier. But you can see we also have like the H series, which has not just incredibly fast CPUs, but also has InfiniBand networking support, so that you can actually do network communication between the VMs at extraordinarily high bandwidth levels. So if you're doing like seismic data analysis in the cloud in an HPC style workload, that ends up being a particularly good suited version. If you want to do lots of data processing and run a giant Hadoop cluster or massive data warehouse, our L series that's new has huge amounts of local SSD drives that you can drive on top of it. And our NVIDIA-based chips, we have both GPU as well as both visualization as well as computation support that you can leverage. And then one of the things that we announced just in the last month is even more new VM sizes, including one specifically focused around deep learning with the latest NVIDIA P40s that NVIDIA just came out with. That would be the latest generation of GPUs from NVIDIA. I think we'll be the first cloud provider out there that offers those, makes them available. We're also bringing out the next generation of the NVIDIA P100s, which again, fantastic for doing computation and GPU support. And then you'll see us come out shortly with our new DD3 and ED3 options, which give you high memory as well as the latest generation of that D family. And those will support the nested virtualization capability that I showed off in that giant M series version. And as I'll talk about a little bit later on when I talk about containers, one of the things that's nice about the nested virtualization capabilities of those systems is that you can not just run full VMs inside a VM, which is interesting but maybe not as typical, but you can also take advantage of some of the work that we're doing around hosting Docker-based images in a completely virtualized way, so that you just basically spin up Docker containers, but they run with a Hyper-V isolation boundary across them, and that is particularly interesting for microservice-based architectures. It's something very unique to Azure that you can take advantage of as part of it. And with that, let's go back and do another quick demo. So I showed off that M-series VM that you can take advantage of, which is the very large VM. I'm going to show something else that is maybe less technically exciting, but also I think hopefully interesting for people that are running Azure today or people that are looking to run Azure today, which is a capability that we launched about a month ago, but I still, when I talk to customers, most of them aren't as aware of it or know exactly what it is. And when I show it to them, they usually get more interested because it enables you to save up to 50% of your compute costs of what you're spending. And so it ends up being particularly interesting once you hear that. And that's basically when you create virtual machines now inside Azure. That comes back, great. So I'm just creating this typical Windows VM here. I can spin up and I can choose whether I want SSDs or whether I want HDDs. I can set all the standard stuff that you'd expect around a virtual machine. And then the other thing I just wanted to make sure I demo is this cool little feature at the bottom of the Create blade, which is called Save Money. And many of you that work for existing companies and enterprises today probably already have Windows Server licenses that you take advantage of in your existing environment, meaning the company's already paid for them. If those Windows Server licenses have what's called software assurance, which is what most enterprises end up buying, you can basically click this button that says yes, and then you basically confirm that you actually have the license, and then you click OK, and basically then you don't have to pay for the Windows Server license component of the virtual machine running in Azure. That's basically about a 40 to 50% reduction in price on your VM versus any other cloud provider. And so definitely we're checking if you already have Windows Server with software assurance, which my guess is if you work for a company today, you probably do. As you move to the cloud, you can take advantage of that to dramatically lower your costs. You can run Windows Server workloads now more cost effectively than any other cloud provider out there. And the beauty is you don't have to enter in the PID, you don't have to copy a license, you literally just check that box. Please do have a license if you check the box, but then you click OK and away you go. And we do have an ability inside the portal if you want to see which VMs are running with the license, so that if you only have a certain number of licenses, you can actually monitor how many you're using. But that's a great feature to take advantage of if you're running Windows Server workloads, and it's available for you to start using across any VM size inside Azure today. So, in the afternoon session, the tips and tricks, I'll go into a lot more detail about a whole bunch of other capabilities that you can leverage now inside Azure, specifically for infrastructure. So things like managed disks that give you better availability. We'll talk about availability sets. We'll talk about some of the new monitoring capabilities that you can use. And so I'll go into even more depth on VMs a little bit later on. But since this is a developer event, what I thought I'd do is move on from just talking about infrastructure here this morning to kind of switch gears and talk more about applications and how you can build apps on top of Azure that ride above the infrastructure and to take advantage of some of the unique platform services that we have built in that can make you even more productive. And one of the things we hear a lot from people is, hey, I want that productivity. It's great that you can spin up VMs. It's great that I can run Linux VMs, Windows VMs, I can use Chef to configure them, but for a lot of my tasks, I don't want to have to manage VM infrastructure myself. I'd really rather you manage it, and instead I want to focus more on the application layer and be able to take advantage of building apps instead as part of it. And that's one of the places where I think Azure really shines through some of our platform services. And so we're going to walk through a bunch of demos now, starting with web apps, then we'll do mobile, then we'll go to containers, serverless computing, microservices, and a bunch more. That'll actually highlight some of these platform services and show off how you can take advantage of them. So let's start by talking about one of the services that's most popular in Azure. It's probably the easiest one to get started with, which is called Azure App Service. And this basically gives you a way you can build web apps, you can build mobile apps, you can build API-based apps, and you can do so in any language. So you can do .NET, Java, Node, PHP, Python, Go, Ruby, and more. It supports auto-patching, so basically you deploy an app and you never have to worry about patching the VM. We do all that for you. It also has built-in auto-scaling support so that you can automatically configure the app to basically use effectively one VM's worth of compute. But if you need more, you can automatically scale up the app to run across multiple VMs. And you can even set up a load balancing scale set rule that allows you to increase and decrease the amount of VMs that are used based on the actual usage of how your apps can hit. And it's really easy to integrate with existing apps, and we support continuous deployment, which will show off from a wide variety of different ways. So you can deploy Git, you can basically have your code in GitHub or VSTS or Bitbucket or your own local Git repo, and you can effectively set it up so that every time you check in, you automatically build, test, and then optionally deploy the app into Azure App Service, all in a very smooth, continuous way. With that, let's go ahead and show some demos. So, quick poll of hands here. How many people are doing .NET development? Great. How many people are doing Java? That's many Java. We still love you. How many people are doing Node? People doing Node, okay. How many people are doing Python? Python, great. Go. Okay, go to Ruby. No Ruby. Interesting. Okay. Well, we love you anyway. So let's look at the poll of hands. There's a lot, we're gonna have a lot of .NET demos throughout the day, but let's start with, just to be more welcoming here, let me actually flip, if we can go to machine 2. There we go. So let's actually switch over to a Mac, and let's actually do our first demo using Node.js on a Mac. Just to kind of show off again, it's really easy to deploy here into Azure, and you can build an app in anything. So what do we want to call this app that we're going to create? I'm not going to call it, picking a sports team name I learned is a dangerous, 10% of the audience loves you and the other 90% want to kill you. What was the one you had over there? Red Dev. Okay, you can do that. Red Dev AMS, how about that? So we're going to create a directory, Red Dev AMS. I'm going to use any tool I want to. I'm going to use VS Code though. And let's see here. I think I have a node. Hello World app here. And so we're going to say, instead of Hello World, we'll say Hello Amsterdam. Red Dev Amsterdam. Okay. So simple Hello World app. We can make it more complicated, but let's just keep it simple for right now. So it says Hello World Red Dev Amsterdam. I can go ahead now and run it using, oh, that's exciting. Somewhere in here, I have a bug. Save it? Oh, okay. Hello, Amsterdam. I lost the browser. Unhandled exception error.
It's the port number. It's a user.
Oh, good point. Thank you. That's what the error message said, isn't it? just trying to prove it's real. See, that's the great thing about events like this. I actually have a demo later that I just realized I'm still running, so that was why. Thank you for pointing that out. So hello Amsterdam, finally. So let's go ahead now and let's deploy this one in the cloud. So I'm going to go in the Azure Management Console here. We're going to create a new web app. And so I'm going to hit new, I'm going to hit web and mobile. Web app. And we'll call this Red Dev MS. And I'm going to deploy this here in West Europe. I'm just going to add it to a resource group, so lets me group things together, so that way I can delete my demos at the end of the tour. I'm going to pin it to the dashboard so we can make it easy to find. We'll hit create. Oh, it's not available, so someone has already taken that. Red Dev Amsterdam. And what this is now doing, I think I accidentally hit the wrong keystroke, so we're going to try that one more time. This is the joy of live coding. Red Dev Amsterdam. There. Use this. So. Just in case. Hit it, create. And what this should be doing now is going ahead and deploying this application in West Europe as an Azure App Service. And so this is basically standing up effectively an environment that I can deploy this Node app into. It's going to register the DNS for me. It sets up all the load balancing rules automatically. And what I have now here is a blank application that's deployed that I'm ready now to actually deploy code into. And the way I'll do that is one of a variety of different ways. And so if you click on deployment options here on the left, we give you a couple different ways that you can deploy things. So you can deploy it with FTP. You can go ahead and, if you're using Visual Studio, which we'll show later, I can just right click and deploy using our internal deployment protocol that's HTTP based. And then we also have a way that you can set up continuous integration from a variety of different sources. So I can deploy it through VSTS, which we'll also show in a few minutes, which gives you kind of a rich build and test environment and release management that you can then push. But I can also pull from just GitHub if I just want to pull the source, since this is Node and there's source code. Or in this case here, I'm just going to use what's called a local Git repository and just explicitly push it from my machine. I'm going to hit OK. And this is now basically configuring this to have a Git endpoint that I can deploy to. And this little URL here, which I can copy, is the deployment URL. And so now I can go back into my app, cancel that here. I'm going to then say git init to initialize Git in this directory. I'm going to add a source file. I'm going to do a commit and say my initial checking. So. And then I'm basically going to add a remote. So I'm going to say git add remote. I'm going to name it Azure. I'm going to paste in the URL for that site that we just created. And what that means now is I can say git push Azure master. It's going to ask me for password just once. And what this is now doing is it's connecting to Azure. It's taking my local Git repository, pushing up the changes to it, and then what Azure is going to go ahead and do is take those that code and deploy it into this app. And now if I go back here and hit this URL, Hello Amsterdam is now running in the cloud in Azure in West Europe here in Amsterdam, all scaled out and running on top of that new app that we just deployed. And the cool thing is, if I want to make a change, I just open it up again, and where it says, "Hello Amsterdam, thanks for pointing out the port." Save. I just go ahead and make another change. So I'll say git add, git commit, updated text. And then we'll just again do another git push Azure master to deploy it again. And so this is just deploying the diff in terms of the code. And successful. We come back here, refresh. It's now live again in the cloud. So pretty easy way. I can go deploy things. I can start making changes in a pretty continuous way. And what's nice also is if I go back to that deployment options tab, we'll actually show you all of the different pushes that have happened. So you can see the full history that we synchronized, in this case here with Git. If I want to, I can even go ahead and actually choose to redeploy the initial change if I wanted to. If I want to roll back any of those things. So I can go ahead and say redeploy. Just realized I actually haven't ever tested this, but I'm assuming it's working. And it did. And so pretty easy way I can roll forward, roll back, get full support for managing all that, and be able to do so as well. I mentioned earlier in terms of some of the other features that you can leverage when you're using app services is the ability to, and right now by default it just has a simple Azure websites.net domain. I can go ahead and configure my own custom domain, so I can map any A record or CNAME record to this. I can add SSL, all that sort of built into the service. And we try to make it easy for managing both SSL and domain names. We also have built-in support now for integrating with the content delivery network. So if you want to basically offload images and static assets, that's now much easier to do as of 2 weeks ago, where we kind of guide you directly in the product to do so. The other thing we have then, if you scroll down, is the ability to both scale up your app service plan and scale out. And what this basically means is I can either add a bigger VM size and have my application run on bigger and bigger VMs. So I could start with, say, 1.5 gigabyte of RAM, and I can go up to many, many gigabytes of RAM. Or for more web apps or scenarios, more common cases, what I want to do is scale out. And so instead of having bigger and bigger VMs, what I really probably want to do is have more of them. And for most front-end scenarios, that ends up working much better. And so one of the nice things about Azure Web Apps is, or the app service, is I can just go to the Scale Out tab and configure how many virtual machines are running to support this app. And so I can just slide it up or down. By default, you get up to 10 VMs. It's just a quota limit. If you call us, you can add a lot more. The other thing that we do have support for is a capability called auto-scale. So instead of explicitly configuring I want 1 or 4 or 2 VMs, what you might want to do instead is actually say I want to have a minimum of, say, 2 VMs, a maximum of 7, and by default, we'll just start with, will be 2. And I want to add a scale condition, and so I can go ahead and say, based on CPU or based on the time of day, I want to add more or fewer VMs. And so you can create kind of a nice rule where I could effectively decide based on, say, the CPU range of my system, how much I want to add or remove based on it. And so, like, for example, this rule here allows me to configure, is the CPU greater than 70%? Great for more than 10 minutes, add a VM. And then I can also put a cooldown period where I can basically say if it's less than 20% for 10 minutes, reduce a VM up to a max and minimum size. So it gives me lots of flexibility to basically set up these auto scale rules that I can increase or decrease the capacity of my app based on just what I actually need in terms of utilization. This is a great trick if you're not taking advantage of it today with Azure. The auto-scale support works with VMs as well. There's a little bit more work with VMs because we don't know exactly what your app is doing, but you can configure up auto-scale rules there as well as with our container service and VM scale sets. What we find generally is customers that set up auto-scale typically realize over 50% cost savings because for much of the day, your customers are asleep or your employees are asleep. And so if you can safely scale down and then just as usage ramps up, add more capacity, you're only paying for what you use, you pay by the minute, and you can realize enormous cost savings as you do it. So anyway, that was a little bit about how to create with Node.js. Let's switch gears now to machine 3, I think. And let's actually show how you can do it with .NET as well. And what we do for the .NET version here is basically load up a simple project and just kind of show off what it takes in order to actually deploy such a project to Azure. So I'm going to load up just a simple ASP.NET MVC project that I already have. Go. And this is just the same project I'd get if I did file new, so I haven't changed anything to it. It has, as you'd expect, simple content within it. But I could do web forms, I could, any type of ASP.NET app would work. And then what we've done with VS 2017, and you can also get this plugin for VS 2015 in earlier editions, is basically implemented the support so you can just right-click and hit publish directly from the Solution Explorer. And when you do that, it brings up this dialog that lets me point to either a new or existing app service, web app that I want to deploy to. And so in this case here, I'll just choose an existing one. VS can automatically query my Azure subscription, so we add in support so it can go ahead and see all the apps deployed in here in a nice kind of integrated way. So I'm just going to deploy to, click on it. There we go. I'm just going to deploy to that particular app. And this will then download all of the publishing details necessary to deploy. And then what you should see here is it's doing a build on my local machine of the app. And then in just a few seconds, my app will be deployed. And what it should do then is pop open a browser. And in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. It's there. I usually get it right, but the network maybe is a little slower today. But it's a little game I play. And similarly, as you saw on the previous one, if I wanted to, for example, go ahead and deploy a change, I could obviously do that. We're just a little slow. Listen. And so let's just go ahead and change my home page here. We'll call this hello. And so with the deployment slot, you just go click in this left menu here under deployment. And with the deployment slot, you can go ahead and create any number of instances of your app that are going to run in the same environment, but which basically won't be live in production until you click a button to say it's okay. And so, for example, I could create a new deployment slot. I could call it testing or staging or QA department version 2 or whatever you want to name it. And so right here, I'm just creating a testing slot. I also have a staging slot here. So now I have an additional slot. And it has a special URL. You can give it any URL you want. So if you want to put in like a GUID or something that's unguessable, you can. You can also lock down so that only your internal team can get access to it. But it's a published URL that's different than your main URL. And now when you go inside, say Visual Studio here, let's go ahead and make a change. We'll say, hello Amsterdam, this is the new version.